Hello, everybody who joined us today. Thank you so much. Our goal, Matt and I, have been talking quite a bit about different things that brokers are doing to grow through the rain. Meaning, just we've talked to a lot of brokers. We both Matt and I have been on the road at a few different trade shows and the Thai User Summit, and just talking to a ton of brokers all through this year, and we're getting to see what is working, what seasoned brokers are focusing on, how they're taking advantage of sort of the lull in the market in order to come out the other side better. And so we're hoping to share some of that with you and just really have a general conversation around what we're seeing. And, there's nothing super structured about this. Matt and I we've talked a bunch personally, and we want to talk about it live and see if hopefully we can add some value. We do have a chat bar, so would love to hear from anybody who's attending where you think the market is headed over the rest of this year, or if you have any questions on areas that you're struggling, or even things that you're seeing that are working for you that you care to share with the rest of the webinar. We'll talk about it as we see them, but for now we'll just lead off with some intros, and then we'll get into some of the topics at hand. So, Matt, if you could, just for anybody who doesn't know you, doesn't know GreenScreens, could you just introduce yourself, tell us a little about GreenScreens, and then maybe tell us what's exciting this year so far for GreenScreens?
Yeah. First off, thanks everybody for joining. And Sean, thanks for having us on here. So Matt Silver, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at GreenScreens. And what GreenScreens is trying to do, and what we are, is we're solving that gap in the pricing market for brokers around what should I pay on a given lane. And there's been tools that have been around for some time that look backwards. They give you filtration over historical periods. That's good. We've all used them, right? When I was booking loads, I was a customer of every tool out there. What GreenScreens is doing is a little bit different in that we're predicting the future. So when that load picks up later today, tomorrow, week from now, whatever, we're putting pricing around that. And we do it one of two ways. We predict the market value, so what everybody aggregated together is going to pay. And then we build out a machine learning model that's specific to each and every brokerage, because as everybody knows, within the brokerage world, even in your own team, everybody's going to cover a load a little bit differently. But at the brokerage level or the MC DOT level, each brokerage has a different mix of customers, the shippers, the carriers they engage with, even the tools that allow them to take a load to market and find capacity. So all of that is really biased in the modeling and how somebody will predict. And we're able to come up with a prediction for a brokerage of their cost of coverage that is plus or minus single digit variance. So highly, highly accurate.
Awesome. Thank you for the explanation. And we'll get intros sort of out of the way, and then we'll dive into the topic. But so Sean, Chief Revenue Officer at Thai Software, we focus on, we provide a TMS for freight brokers specifically, both core competencies being full truckload and LTL brokers. And we have a lot of customers that do quite a bit of both, integrated pretty heavily with GreenScreens in order to make it so that customers can actually quote their shippers a lot faster through Thai using the predictive tool, and then leveraging their own data to verify that. And one of our biggest things for the truckload market is being able to aggregate all of the quotes in one place, which GreenScreens does a great job of that in terms of how they use your data and their market data to find the right rate for you. But we've got it so that you can visualize that right in Thai, and then look at your network and do your network outreach right from there. And one of the cool new things we're doing right now is we built a workflow automation tool into Thai. And so you can actually build out your own automations that are specific to your business and what's going to make your business more efficient. Everybody gets kind of sick of hearing automate unless it actually has some meat on the bones, right? So it's really a matter of a lot of companies spend a lot of money getting a third party or bringing somebody internally to build automations into their TMS. And so we've just created a very simple user interface for a non-technical user to be able to do something like, whenever we get a committed shipment from this customer, it gets automatically put on this team's plate, and then maybe automatically doing the outreach for you to the carrier network. So that's just one cool thing. So, I appreciate you, everybody who's attending, just letting us get our mini pitches out of the way to let you know who we are. But we'll get into the meat and potatoes of the webinar now. So So Matt, as we were talking about, you and I have been on the road. We've been, it feels like all year, and I see you at all the events, right? So, it's been, I think for me, it's been like 2 trips a month all year. I'm trying to take the summer off of the travel, but the cool thing about all this is we get to talk to a lot of freight brokers in person and kind of figure out, get a pulse on the market and see how things are going. So, based on what you've heard, what do you think about where the market is right now, and what are you hearing brokers struggling with in the market today?
Yeah, well, I think the answer is obvious and has been echoed for quite some time now, in that we're clearly at the bottom, right? And look, that's bad. The good news is, right, if there's a silver lining to any of this, is that it's not getting worse, and it hasn't been getting worse for some time now. So arguably, this is the lowest point it will be. There's little data points out there, and I know our company, as well as some of the other analytics companies out there, are really reporting these like really small glimmers of hope, right? Couple percent changes here and there, but they're upward changes, and so that's good. But what we're hearing a lot from the brokerage world is, certainly this is a cycle, right? Anybody who's been in this long enough, there's ebbs and flows, and it comes back around. So being at the bottom, if we are looking for the silver lining of it, is that we're at the bottom, and the only direction from here is up. And again, there's little signals showing us that we are heading in that direction. And certainly we don't want to see bankruptcies and companies consolidated and all of that stuff that is happening. But with that are the market corrections that are necessary to get back to an upward projection of rates, rate per mile increasing, capacity getting a little more scarce, even if it's only in certain areas due to seasonality and all those fun things that we're all used to fighting against. But all of that will lead us to an upward projection of those rates, and hopefully more dollars per transaction, right? That's I think one of the things I've heard from a lot of people lately is it's, some people argue about like, well, my margin percentage is down, or my margin raw dollars are down. And some of the other ones we're hearing from are really just about, we're maintaining margin percentage. We're just not seeing the dollars per transaction grow. And that's, what they were used to a few years ago.
Yeah, I completely agree that it feels like we're right at the bottom of it. And it kind of feels like it's been that way for this year, but you're right. And that's a good way to say it, is it doesn't feel like it's gotten worse based on who I've talked to. I'm sure that's case by case. Some brokers may feel otherwise, where it feels like it's gotten worse. But you and I both, we have some mutual customers that have talked about even improving their bookings per day per rep, and their margins are going up. And you're right, the dollar amount is not where we all would like to see it, but that's where I'm in the same boat and as far as what I hear. And I've made the prediction that I think that we're still, like, for the rest of this year, it'll feel like a tough market. I don't think we really feel like recovered from this until maybe Q2 of next year. And I hope, I'm not trying to scare anybody or make some crazy, prediction that's, just salacious, but it is important to know where we are. I think we'll see an uptick, obviously, in the seasonality in Q3, but I don't think it'll feel like a good year at any point. Yeah.
Yeah, and just piggybacking on that, individuals like us, Sean, we've worked together for many, many years, and I've been at a few different logos. I started as a customer, even of your system. So I've been in that brokerage seat. And, one of the things to always keep in mind is I don't think I've ever sat back, even what I can look back now and identify as a good year, but I've never ran a brokerage where it was like, you know what, everything's aces. This is great. Rates are awesome. Capacity is relatively easy to find. Everything's going in the right direction.
Yeah.
In my entire career in freight, it's always been like, well, what about this? And what about this? And I need this to be better. And it's never aligned appropriately. So there is a measure of, what are we expecting, right? Today it's all about what is that rate per mile, right? What am I earning on this? Yeah. As opposed to, how is my business operating holistically and collectively up against the market and others, right? Am I surviving? Am I doing well? Am I growing? I think, to your point, we have a lot of mutual customers. We've been at every event, certainly this calendar year and last. And it's, the one thing that is really exciting for me is looking at the companies that are growing, right? There's acquisition activity that's happening, and whether that's somebody capitalizing on a down year for somebody else, those dollars come to us typically from outside the industry, right? A lot of those deals are financed externally. So when banks are looking at the industry and seeing signs of hope, they're investing in, companies like ours or our competitors. It's good for the industry as a whole to see that activity start to come back.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that I see brokers that are less seasoned do is sometimes they put a little, like, there's a little bit of panic, and so they end up getting into this really short-term mindset of like, how do we get more going, how do we get more going. And I came up on the sales side of things, so it's a pretty common trait for sometimes sales reps that get into a panic mode where, yeah, the pipeline is not where you want it to be, so how do I get it filled immediately so I can close a deal tomorrow, right? And instead of thinking a little bit more long term, right? Like a seasoned broker will look at this type of market and just accept the fact that we have these cycles, right? It's just the way it is. And you're not really, and this is true about even tech companies in our industry or brokers, like, you're not really a solid company until you make it through one of these cycles and you come out on the other side like shining, right? And so there are brokers that have done it several times and they're not panicking. And one of the worst things I think brokers can do right now is get in the mindset of just too fast paced and not looking at their processes to find out, like, okay, like, there's only so much to be had out there. Obviously we're going to keep working for more, finding more accounts, finding more shipments, and try to up our revenue. But I think that the brokers I see actually just taking a step back and going, all right, it's a little slow, what could we be doing better, right? And trying to get themselves off of the post and pray methodology where they're posting, like, overly reliant on the load boards, or their pricing part of the process is a little bit bottlenecked, where it's they're kicking it up to a pricing specialist who uses like way too many screens and doesn't have like the data right in front of them so they can respond quickly or train other brokers on how to price things. So like, I see the brokers who haven't been doing well are panicking, not trying to fix their processes, not trying to like use the lull to like come out the other side with good carrier relationships, good tools in place, like a low amount of time on their process, right? And so, and the ones that are thriving, and we have one mutual customer that actually did a webinar with us a few months ago, and they rebuilt their process internally around the truckload quoting page within TIE. And then they have the GreenScreens predictive analytics, and then they've got their capacity tools, right? And by training their team around that for faster pricing in the spot quote market, faster process for finding load coverage, they were able to double their freight bookings per person per day, and their margins went up, right? So you see that part of it, and then you also see folks panicking about their margin.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said. I've got an old boss from many years ago, back when I was in the service industry, who would legitimately, if he saw you not doing something, right? The mantra was, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. And that's, as annoying as it was when I was, trying to cook steaks and do things like that, it really has kind of held on to me through this industry and some of the businesses I've been a part of, where it's like, in these downturns or in the time where you have nothing to do, relationship build, right? Mm-hmm. Your job is to have amazing relationships with your customers that do insulate against some of these things. And you need to have those same relationships with your carriers. I legitimately, in the TMSs that I've used, my screen used to be surrounded with Post-it notes of people's names, their dog's name, what kind of truck they drove, right? Being able to call out somebody's Kenworth, right? All of those little things that get them to answer your call before the other broker, or give you a little bit of a deal when you need to squeeze, but you have to be able to reward them. So spending these down cycles to really hone in on those relationships and sharpen the skills. And, something we even talk about with our sales team is getting back to basics, right? Yes, it's tough. We get it. It's tough for everybody. And Sean, to your point, there are also people growing. There's people using this downtime to clean up processes, rethink their tech stack, make sure that they're utilizing things in the right ways. I legitimately met somebody at the conference, your conference that we were all at, who told us point blank, he's like, yes, we buy your product. I can't say I've logged into it. Right. And it wasn't fitting of his role, but in him telling us that story, he's like, you know what? I probably should understand it since I'm trying to direct my staff to use it. And so we set up a meeting to go through it and make sure he knows where all the buttons and clicks are and what they do. And obviously they'll be more fruitful for it. But it was just that realization of like, oh, we're stuck in our old process, right? We've been doing things one way and that got us to where we are. It doesn't mean that gets us out. It doesn't mean that we continue being fruitful. We have a little bit of time on the desk right now. Let's use that to improve the process, really understand the tools, and try to find ways to stand out using what's already in front of us. Even not even saying like, let's go spend more money on more tools. Let's just get all the juice out of the fruit we have.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and you said something about like the relationship aspects of things. That's what I've been talking a ton about. And I know it's, to a certain degree, it gets talked about a lot in our industry, but it's because it's so important. But, you mentioned our user summit. The whole point of that, especially, I think it was super timely because everybody who showed up, we had our partners there. And our goal was to make sure that like we've got all this new stuff that if you've been using Thai for a few years, maybe you're not even using because you just get set in your processes and how you're using it today. And that's the goal, is to kind of open everybody's eyes to like what else you could be doing. And right now is the time to explore some of the things that are already there. So your customer in point, like, yeah, like I know we have you, but I haven't really dug into it. Like right now, when we talk about you have time to lean, you got time to clean, that methodology. I was a restaurant guy too. So but it's also giving them some direction on like what can you be doing so that it's a little bit more methodical, so that you don't just feel like you're being like panic busy, right? Like you don't want, like using the restaurant example, you don't want your team just being like, I gotta scrub stuff that's already clean, right? Like no, just like actually look for things that maybe could be done, and exploring what your current tech stack does that you're not utilizing is a great way to do it. And I think that there are ways to use your tech stack to build relationships, right? Like if you are methodically going after certain accounts and you start to figure out what lanes they run most commonly, and you're starting to get your foot in the door with some of these shippers, and you're maybe you don't have shipments coming in yet, or maybe you got a few here and there, but you haven't really won that account yet. A great way to prepare for that, as you feel as you feel them kind of opening the door for you a little bit, if you can find out what their common lanes are. If you don't have that as a common lane, and you know that if you do start to win some shipments from them that you're going to be posting, right? It's a great time to start aggregating a bunch of carriers that run on that lane, picking up the phone, calling them, seeing, just kind of figuring out how they're going to be. And one of the cool things about using our products together that our customers talk about is, even in a market like this, if they are trying to collect quotes from carriers, they can see it all on one page, and they can see who's quoting them accurately, right? Like, so if they receive quotes from a bunch of carriers and they compare that to their average and then the GreenScreens rates, like this is a great way to find out like who's an honest character, right? Like who is actually being methodical about how they're trying to partner with you as a broker, right? Because those are the guys where right now, when you have a little bit of time, talk to them about where you are, be transparent, like ask them about what lanes they want to run most often, and try to get all that information. Because when this deal closes over here, I mean, the best thing you can do is just be ready to go. And if you've already got your foot in the door, then when the market turns, even if you don't have the full account, you're already in, and maybe they're going to start sending you some overflow loads, right? And you're ready to go. You've got carriers in place ready to run those for you. And I think that's what a lot of the brokers that are succeeding right now, they've spent years doing that. And they always use this time period to continue to build that network.
Yeah. And there's a lot within the open and honest communication, both on your bid side, when you're bidding out to a shipper and you're collecting quotes from carriers, understanding why, right? Like I've been guilty in my past of being with an organization where we raced to the bottom on every bid, right? We just wanted volume. Mm-hmm. And then I've been at organizations that were very boutique-y, and we would actually recommend other brokers if you wanted to race to the bottom. That's not what we do, right? But we would take the time to have those conversations with the shipper of like, we are going to outservice everybody point blank, but that's why our price is here. And I'm actually okay if I'm in position 2, 3, 4 of your routing guide. That's fine by me. but do know when you call me, I will have a truck for you. Right.
Yeah.
And we would do the same with our carriers of like, hey, man, I'm not going to squeeze you. I don't need to take every dollar out of your pocket, but we both need to make money. Right. And I think there's this interesting interplay right now with a lot of carriers. Like, yes, there's always going to be, we've all got the stories of you post a load. There's 2 phone calls that are definitely coming your way if you post. And we all know the phone numbers. We're all trying to ignore those calls, and they're going to ask you for like $800 to $1,000 over whatever you posted that load at. I've always tried to block those numbers in my VoIP system so they don't even get to my staff, but they're out there. But there are a lot of carriers, some of the newer entrants to market that unfortunately they did buy or lease equipment at horrible rates, right? And I see a comment here in the chat about being able to maximize return on every dollar spent, especially borrowed capital. And that I think really gets into some of these guys where it's not just, they've got the fuel cost per mile that everybody has, right? Everybody's buying diesel at reasonably the same discount level. But when you have a back end cost that is so inflated, not every load is for you, right? And those carriers have to be very selective about who they engage with in what lanes. And hopefully they're making up for a higher cost with a higher service level. But that also bleeds into the brokers. And again, just having open and honest conversations. I can't tell you the number of shippers I've worked with where it's like, look, I will not be the cheapest truck. I will outservice everybody. And also, my guy, my carrier that I'm going to send into your facility is a professional, right? You want him to have PPE? No problem. We got it. You want him on time? No problem. He's always on time for us, right? He's courteous. He's respectful. He's all of these things. And we're going to have a good experience together. We're going to move your freight. We're going to meet whatever your demands are. And one of the things that always blows my mind, going back to the brokerage sales side, is like, why does your shipper need that moved, right? Is this like inventory replenishment? It's cool if it gets there today or tomorrow, or do they have a contract deadline, right? I've done a lot of beverage in my day. And those beverage moves, man, you need to be on store shelves just before the sale hits, right? So it's like, you got to get to the DC 3 days early. You have deadlines. And if you don't, your invoice rate is reduced. So taking the time, and I know we're just sounding like broken records, but taking the time to have the conversation, set expectations, but also take the time to understand everybody's position. Why is this important? Why are we at this rate? What does it look like for us to get to here to make this happen? Again, we can put together a C grade transaction at this price. I've got a B grade and I've got an A+ solution for you. Also, where do we need to be on this?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, most brokers know this, but some, like you mentioned, do get caught up in just kind of the pricing war, right? But it really is obviously the service that brokers provide that makes them so valuable. I mean, it's a fragmented market, and really anywhere where there's a fragmented market where you need some expertise, a broker exists, and brokers provide a ridiculously good service if they're doing things right to the shipper, right? A valuable service. And so finding contracts just like that, though, where it's more about like, I need this to be on time, I care about the service, right? And then actually looking for carriers that promise, and can deliver on being on time, giving you the tracking, like always communicating with you, being fair on price, being transparent with each other, right? Like it all comes together. And this comment from Josh too, I could not agree more. It's time to scrutinize time. And we've been talking a ton about that. And we actually, I think on this, we have something that can be downloaded. That's just an article on little areas where you can measure how much time is going into certain parts of the process. And one of them that's kind of relevant to what you and I do is the how long does it take you to process, like a request comes in from a shipper. How long does it take you before they have numbers on their plate, right? Before they have a quote for that in the spot quote market. Actually, like I've told brokers, time it, literally physically time it, and then know how long it's taking per, like, what's your average time to respond, and then how many are you missing. And unfortunately, this tends to be a bit of a blind spot for a lot of brokers because it lives inside the inbox, right? And it lives in several inboxes. So finding a way to pull that all in, and then even related to like how long does it take, even though coverage can take as long as it takes the carrier to respond to you, or several carriers to respond to you, how many minutes, or how many, like, hopefully not hours, but how many minutes does it take you just to walk through the process of what you would do to find load coverage? So emailing the carriers that would be who using this network, posting to the load boards if you're going to post, leveraging a capacity tool like how, like literally stopwatch. How long does it take somebody to do it? And then understand that if you're watching them and timing them, they're doing it faster than they've ever done it. And right, so like you can obviously inflate that. And if you don't give your team a way to move through that cycle quickly, right? And you're just like, hey, you just need to do it faster. It's going to be like kind of a panic session. More mistakes are going to happen. They're going to do it while you're watching, and they're going to get set back in their own ways, right? So if you identify in these key areas that it's taking way too long, and because it's taking long, we're losing, right? We're taking too long to respond to customers, so we're losing on these quotes. And now it's literally just a big waste of time. And then if it takes you forever to find load coverage, like you're not going to be able to cover as many loads, right? So revenue. So I literally tell brokers, like, I think you should time your team, time who your fastest person is, time who you think your slowest person is. Like if you're not capturing win loss ratios, like you got to find a way to put technology in place to capture it or something, right? Or some kind of methodology for it.
So you're tugging at all of my heartstrings right now with my background in brokerage ops. Looking at like the time to transact is so important, and it's not just the obvious like we need to do this faster. And we're seeing a ton of this right now from the shipper community to our brokers is like, I want to automate my quote from you, right? And we've all seen there's a ton of companies that play in that space. Both of us are partnered with pretty much everybody, I think, that transacts that way. And now there's all of these inbox automation tools that are helping brokers get ahead. But that win-loss data is what's super important. We just recently launched a product called Ignite that is targeting that exact problem. Like, what you're winning, right? And you're aware of the cost to move those transactions because you can measure it and all of that good stuff. But what about all the loads that your team's quoting that never make it to the TMS, which is the worst outcome? And guilty of it in my past, right? Nobody builds a load that you didn't win. Nobody wants to do that. And there are tools out there to help with that now. Where were they back when I was booking loads? But being able to gather that data, and we're looking at this a little bit differently, where we are working with everybody, whether it's a quote automation partner, a TMS partner, anywhere where quote data might live, we're trying to collect it on behalf of mutual clients and then pull analytics out of that and display it back to people. So you can understand like, hey, if I were to quote here or here, that might have an effective outcome on my business that would yield dollars in our pocket. One of the things that, I know was a pain in my side back when I was running brokerages, and we hear from customers all the time, is we're buying pricing guidance, right? We're spending money on tools to help get to the answer. We're helping to automate it, but now we've got fingers in it because somebody is $200 away from hitting their commission. So they're trying to pad all of these quotes going outbound, and we're actually not winning them, right? And not to say you need to thin your margins just to get to somewhere, but the individual ambition might be greater or more influential on that transaction cycle than the company's goals. And, if you have a couple people, it becomes a manageable problem. But, there's a period of time where I had 350 brokers working for me, and that can add up to some serious dollars. And, just to quote all of my old bosses, I guess today, I'm feeling that vibe. But I had an old boss, Bill Greeter, great guy, who used to just hammer in the idea of like negotiate everything down $1. Right. And like, I always used to laugh like, dude, I'm booking 12 loads this week, right? Like it's $12. What difference does it make? And he would always fire back that like, I had a boss before me who used to tell me, $1 on 1,000,000 transactions is $1 million. And like, it didn't mean anything to me until I was in management and we were booking 1 million loads. And then it was like, oh my God, everybody save $1. That's $1 million.
It's so true. I mean, the little stuff, the little coaching and advice on these things, and it's kind of crazy. But I think it goes back to like where I think brokers can do, I guess, the most most amount of improvement with the theme of this being like growing, using the rain to grow, right? With what's going on, I do think it's a major problem if quotes live in or quote requests live in your inbox and you don't know, right? Like you don't, if you don't know what your win ratio is, I think that's a problem. And that's a great place to start. And it shouldn't be like a panic mode. It should just be, you have time to sit back, you have time to lean, you have time to clean, you have time to sit back and try to think through what does this, like, why are we not capturing this? Why do we not know today what our win loss ratio is? And I mean, I'm biased because obviously Ty has a way to pull those in from your inbox. So it's always kind of a topic where we tend to win for our customers is we can scrape the quote, bring it in, build it for you. So at least now your team can just take a peek at the green screens rates and then fire back really quickly, right? Because if it's taking too long, you're probably losing. And it might not feel super important right now because the market is where it is, right? And maybe it's not like they're not so overwhelmed with these inbound requests that you really have to worry about them missing, right? And taking too long. But and this is a perfect example of when the market turns, right? In 2022, capacity was like such an issue, and all the capacity management tools were just blowing up, right? Because it just was like there wasn't enough trucks, right? There wasn't enough coverage. It will happen again. Like this is the way the cycle works. Like that's going to happen again. And right now, if you have a way to make sure that you know what your win ratio is, and you know your team has a really fast way to respond to those spot quotes, that's how companies with a growth mindset, they put a good amount of emphasis and process around the spot quote market, because that's how they win those long-term customers, by consistently bidding on those and being fair and then doing a really good job on those loads, right? But being just quick. If you're the fastest one every time, you start to rise to the top of that list if they have like a waterfall of brokers that they go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think we've all seen those, BCC lists that some of the shippers send out, right? It's like, I need Phoenix to LA right now. And sometimes they forget to BCC. So they CC you with like 50 other brokers on there.
Yeah.
And yes, there is an element of being the fastest. Obviously, you need to be reasonable when you're the fastest also, but
right.
Following up with a phone call, right? I saw a question pop up about like, how do you differentiate in this market? It's, man, I would kill them with service right now. And think about your personal life. This is like, just pulling on all of our past here with the restaurant industry. Like, I don't know if anybody else has paid attention to this, but like that mid-tier restaurant level is gone. Doesn't exist anymore, right? You have Chipotle and fine dining. Everything in that middle is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. So you're going to race to your thinnest margins, or you're going to kill them with service. And even within that lower market, right? We can talk about Dutch Brothers and Chick-fil-A and all these restaurants that make waves in cities because they have lines and they're not doing anything different aside from being super friendly, right?
Yeah.
They're just out servicing it, right? Is Chick-fil-A all that different than any other chicken restaurant? And, I know we can go down a wormhole with it, but like probably not, right? I'm favorable to it, but like probably not. Chicken is chicken, and it's just a matter of like, can I get through that line on time? But people are making a conscious decision to spend more time in their drive-through line than their competitor down the street. And they're doing it for the experience of it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's like the big takeaway. And there's a lot of things that Sean said that are hugely accurate about like, if we equate all of these things back to farming, like you need to get it right, and you need to get it right early. You need to prep for what's coming, not once it's here. Now you have to like get your processes in place and figure out how to use your technology in the right way and quote customers and cover when things are tough. You can't wait until everything is against you and those headwinds are harder to overcome, when the reality is your competitors are prepping right now, and a lot of them are getting it right? They're focusing on that entire sales process. And again, and I know we're just sounding like broken records here, but they're perfecting that customer experience. And that is something that truly matters. And again, you don't have to be the cheapest. You don't have to do all of these things, but if you do a couple things right, there's somebody I heard speak recently back in January. He's been a consultant to amazing brands, companies that you've heard the success stories of 1,000 times over. And legitimately, his big takeaway from a lot of owners, and I'll try to clean up the language of how it was delivered to us, was like, the best companies out there only do a couple things right. What they avoid is getting a lot of things wrong or effing up a lot of things. And that's just one of those takeaways where it's like, wow, you wouldn't think it was that big of a difference, but companies like Apple, companies like Pepsi, like that's what they did. They got a few things right, and they honed in on that, and they delivered the customer experience. They just avoided the pitfalls of like, I could also do X, Y, Z, and more, right? Why keep trying to add a few things if you're not getting something right today?
Right. Yeah, and I love the Chick-fil-A example just because, like, you're right. The service is great, right? And the product is very consistent, right? So like it or hate it, I love it, by the way. But I love the
Yep,
sauce and
everybody
everything.
loves it.
They're putting one in down the street from my house, and I'm stoked about it. But it is like when you go there, you know that the value of what's being delivered is consistent, right? So if you find value, if it is important to you, like just for like if it's important to your shipper and you can find the common threads of what is important to the shipper beyond just price, and you consistently deliver that, they can count on you. They can keep coming back, just like with Chick-fil-A. I can count on it tasting the same every time. I don't feel like I'm being had on the pricing, right? But you're right. A lot of the, like, even I think Chili's is going out of business, right? And that's a consistent, like, low cost provider on the food. And so we've always said, when I was specifically doing sales, it's, if you win it on price, you'll lose it on price every time. So you don't build a consistent customer base by being competitive on price. You got to be fair, right? To your point earlier, you got to be in the right zone. You can't be overpriced, right? But if you consistently deliver good value to the customer, then they will keep coming back to you, even if you're slightly higher than your competitors. And that's where anything you can investigate related to how to enhance the customer's experience is where the time should be spent right now. And I think, Hector, I don't know if you can put it up. That's our host. I don't know if you can put it up, but we have a white paper that's just, it's not trying to sell anything. It's just 8 specific areas where we see the most common areas for improvement for brokers. And it's all about just like customer experience, right? So we mentioned the quoting on the front end, just being the fastest, right? And then getting the load covered the fastest, right? And that just doesn't happen by telling your team and being mean and like pushing them along. You got to give them the right tools and the right process to find the coverage. But then, even, it's amazing how many companies still spend a ton of time on their track and trace, even though there's, you can't always get the trucking company to download the tracking, right? But there are ways to limit the amount of check calls you have to do. And then you find a ton of areas in the collecting paperwork and the invoicing, right? And you got to keep your, like, as a broker, you got to keep your cash flow in a good place, right? So how much time are you spending? Like, how many hours are spent doing check calls? I honestly think you just literally, you don't have to get fancy, literally just time people. Like, okay, you're about to check on 20 loads, right? How long is it going to take you to get a tracking update on these 20 loads? And just literally time it. Just spend the next however long it takes. You might find that you are literally spending hours a day per person just calling, right? And there's tons of tools out there that can make that part of the job easier. Or the paperwork collection. We see like whole jobs inside brokerages that are just like, you're just trying to get an invoice to your customer that's accurate so that there's no dispute, there's no friction, and they just pay you, right? And it takes, like, you might have a whole job or a whole department just dedicated to like downloading, and then finding the load and then attaching, right? And it's like, that's way too much time spent on sort of a tedious job. Right?
No, there's so many of these jobs, and it's a great call out. I've been at really big brokerages and really boutique small ones where, we have had track and trace staff. We've had staff that just convert things to PDF. We've had staff that title documents certain way, right?
Mm.
Crazy, crazy things that I can't imagine. Like, I look at the tool sets available today and I'm like, tempted, right? Like, I could be a broker and produce so much these days. And like, legitimately, as you were going through some of these examples, like, one of the big, like, I always held it close to my vest. Like, one of my like secrets I would take to companies as like an operator and change their operating ethos was I would call customers and I would also call carriers. And one of the things I would always validate after a transaction is, did we invoice you correctly? And is there a better format I can do this in? Right? Again, like, trying to find a different angle to stand out from your competitors. Back to the differentiation question, excuse me. That's a big point of it, right? Like, dude, if you're friends with the CFO of your shipper, you're in, right? You're going to get paid on time. Let's be clear, it's freight, right? There's going to be a hiccup. Something's going to happen, right? Trucks are always going to be late. There's going to be an accident. All of that's unavoidable. And that's in the actual transit of goods. But when we talk about like the transit of money, right? I want to get paid on time. I want to invoice you correctly. How can I help facilitate that? Dude, I am so happy to call into the accounting department of both my carriers and my customers and have those conversations. And you know what happens is somewhere behind the scenes at a water cooler or actually in a meeting of that company, they will talk about your, brokerage favorably, and they will say, hey, these guys actually care about getting it right. And if you are checking all of these boxes that some of the biggest brokerages in the world are not doing this, and if they did, there'd be a lot of trouble on the horizon, right? Like imagine if these $4 billion year plus brokerages actually had phenomenal service top to bottom, right? We would all be in trouble in this industry. The good news is they don't, right? There's always room for differentiation. And again, this is just one of those little ways to do it. And I say that, by the way, sitting here playing with my tie pen that I picked up, but like those little things, right? When I'm sitting here at work, subconsciously, I'm seeing that logo 1,000 times a day. So like drop your logo places, make sure that, you're getting things into the hands of the right people at your shippers, at your carriers. They're thinking about you, right? We always want carriers calling back to the brokerage with their capacity before they offer it somewhere else. And again, right now, capacity is super easy, but in 6 short months, 5 months, 4 months, somewhere in there, it's going to be difficult. And, we're all going to be fighting over how do I know where the trucks are again? And, I know it's hard to think about that right now, but that wasn't a distant memory, right? And I've been through a few of these cycles now where it's like, oh, that was the hardest thing. That was the easiest thing. That was the hardest thing. It goes back and forth.
Yeah. And you're either stressing about like where are we spending too much money, or you're on the other side of it, like when the market turns, it's like, how do we like get more of the, like we're having to refuse loads because we cannot find a truck, right? And so it's just kind of a perfect time to identify and find a way to, like, we always talk about like a way to rate carriers and make sure that you have your, like the ones you really like working with in order, especially during a time like this, because you can use the tools out there to identify the ones that are super easy to work with, right? Like they are willing to pick up the phone and they are delivering the tracking, right? And it's easier to say no to the ones that won't accept it, but to build a really strong relationships with the folks that it's never a problem. They always get you the paperwork you need on time. They're always letting you track, and then that in turn allows you to deliver a really good customer experience to your shipper, because you have this network of carriers that does things the way that you need it done, right? So it's, I don't know, it's just so important. And I often talk to folks that like obviously both of us were in the, we're on the tech side of things, and we're always trying to figure out where there can be value added for the tech itself, for the broker. And you don't necessarily always need tech. There may be some problems within your brokerage that you don't need tech for. But if you are refusing to look at a potential solution because you think that the cost is too high, before you say it's too high, you can always put a dollar amount on how inefficient your process is. You can always. So if you actually go through to these different areas, and that downloadable thing that we put in there is just those are 8 areas you could be actually measuring the time spent. And if you measure the time spent and then you look at the cost of labor for those, you are, no matter what, you're spending money, right? If your process is inefficient and you're solving it with humans, then you're paying labor, right? And the labor, maybe it's so efficient that that's the way to go. Like, and that can be the case. Like sometimes you need more people in order to deliver a better customer service, but you might actually already have the right people and they're doing a really good job with relationships. And if you just gave them an hour back in their day, they could breathe a little bit and make an extra phone call or two, right? Take a little better, like the calls you're talking about, the emphasis should be on taking the folks that you trust inside your organization and giving them time to be able to call the shipper or the carrier or the billing department and build those better relationships, because across the board it's gonna help. But you do find in brokerages where they're just like, I'm just too busy for this, right? Like I just don't have time to do all that. And so that's a problem, right? Like you have to free up. So maybe you don't have enough people, but maybe you just don't have a process that empowers the folks that you trust. And you have to, those people are the ones that are going to make your business thrive and help you grow your business and last through a time like this. So what are we doing for those people? Like how are we making their jobs more simplified so that they have time to use their brain and take good care of your company?
Yeah. And, I think there's an interesting thing too, that I was just thinking. I'm back on the road next week, as luck would have it. We're going to a really big brokerage, and it stood out to me that they're inviting all of their tech partners in, right? And they're having us all do real quick presentation. And then they're having us work with all of the other tech vendors that they use. And it's basically a communal, how can we help them solve, right? And one of the things that, I hear about from customers all the time is like, man, if I could automate X to Y, or if I could be more efficient with this, all these little things. And our answer to all of that is like, if you're already our customer, cool, do it, right? We've been very fortunate because we're so open. And I know that's, to Sean's point about it may not, you shouldn't be afraid of the cost, or it may not be as expensive as you think. Like, that time costs you money. And it's not to say that the solution is also expensive. Like, I mean, for us, our solution is the cheapest pricing product out there, right? You don't have to buy something else to get to our pricing. We're not charging you per API. We're not charging you per seat, anything like that. But because we're so unrestricted, we've had customers come to us and say, hey, I actually tied on X product to the GreenScreens price, and now I'm doing this to service these shippers, or now I'm doing this to get quotes out to broker or at the carriers. There's a lot of really interesting ways that people have found to use us where we didn't think of it, right? And it's a solution that we couldn't have brought forward because we're not ingrained in that day-to-day. We're not trying to troubleshoot for that one broker sitting in that one seat who's taking that extra mouse click, but he does that mouse click 25 times a day, right? And it's those little things where I've been very fortunate to work with some great people, but we used to monitor mouse clicks, right? Like, why did you click there again? Why did you have to do that, right? Couldn't that be automatic? And as little of a difference as that seems, those are just little mouse clicks. And if you watch your staff and you see some of these bigger processes, like, why are you going to 3 different sites? And Sean, I'm going to call out one of our other partners, somebody also in pricing, by the way, but our friends over at Truck Stop, right? A lot of brokers are using both pricing products. And as we jointly started talking to customers, we found out that, they're in TIE, they're building their transaction, they're looking at Truck Stop's rates, and they're looking at the GreenScreen rate. And yes, you could easily make the argument we are selling against one another, but I don't care if somebody uses more than one pricing product. I just care that they use mine also, right?
Yeah.
Eat chicken and beef. I'm not going to get on you for eating chicken also, right? It's
Right.
cool. So we worked with Truck Stop, and we actually brought them into our integrated environment to bolster the customer experience, to remove mouse clicks, right? You don't have to open a new tab, type in the same information that you might have just typed in. And it's, again, something we work with, and Ty has hands down the greatest integration to GreenScreens, where our entire UI exists right inside the TMS. It's freaking amazing. I wish other people could take note of it. I'm glad they don't, because it allows us to really be unique with Ty. But it is seamless. And it, again, just those little things of like, you don't have to type in Charlotte twice. And I'm confident when I was a broker, man, I still misspell it, right?
Yeah.
Going in and doing those little things, all those little keystrokes, those extra keystrokes, opening another tab, logging in one more time. Oh, now my validation failed and I have to re-authenticate myself. Those 30 seconds here and there happen to brokers all over these big organizations. They add up to minutes and hours of wasted time. Yeah. And, I know we just keep harping on the same thing, but like, those things should be mostly automated. Those are the things you can remove, and then use that time to, even right now, call your carriers and thank them, right? Little things like, man, I used to automate a sequence basically that would alert a capacity manager when a carrier hit like 25, 50, 75, and 100 loads with our customer. And we would just call them and like, hey, bro, really appreciate you. You're doing great. Thank you so much. Yeah. How can we help you? Right?
Goes a long way.
Little things. Yeah.
Yeah. The human touch, honestly, with carriers, I think people, and it works on the sales side as well when you're talking to shippers, but the human element of actually like treating them like human beings, right? And thanking them for when they are doing a good job, acknowledging it. Stuff goes a long way with anybody. I mean, there's people out there that don't care and they're like, whatever, man, just pay me. But most people really do care if you treat them like a human being or not, right? And they're happy to do you a favor if you regularly are taking care of them and you're good to them, and it matters. So and just, I guess, I know we're getting close to the end here, but just to kind of point out what you were saying about being able to see multiple tools. We have several customers that use GreenScreens and other tools like Truck Stop or even Dat Rate View or, different things like that. And they use them all because they want to be able to compare what's happening. They want to leverage the tool and compare it to another piece of data. And then within Tide, we make it super easy for them to aggregate all the quotes they've gotten, not just the loads that they've booked, but all the quotes that they got for each lane. So they can compare green screens to their average over the last 6 months, right? And then view even the most recent shipment. So stuff like that, when you think about how many steps you would need, like if you needed to open up green screens in one window, and then you needed to open up truck stop in another window, and then you had your TMS here, and then you've got a spreadsheet with all of your carriers for that lane, right? And that's your spreadsheet. Not even like, this is one of the common mistakes is nobody else has that spreadsheet or knows your carrier list on that lane, right? So they cannot move as fast as you, which is fine for the individual, but not good for the brokerage, right? So if you think about how many, there are seasoned brokers out there that they don't want to change that process because they've been doing it for so long, and they are pretty fast. To be fair to them, a seasoned broker, they're like, yep, I open all these up and I go boom, boom, boom. And I kind of already know in my head what the price should be. So I'm just verifying and kicking it back to the customer. But how do you train somebody on that? Right? Like, how do you train somebody newer who is very promising and you want them to step into a position where they can help you price more accurately and quickly, and you don't have a good way to train them? When you put it all on one screen and you make it so that you can look at pricing, you can compare pricing, you can email blast carriers, you can post to the load boards in like 5 clicks, it makes it very easy to scale your business. That's so I know that was a little bit of a tie plug, but Matt, any kind of final thoughts on, and well, actually, before I say that, there is also a white paper from Green Screens that's related to machine learning for the average Joe or Jane. So that's probably a great article to look at, just because AI is taking off, and having a layman's understanding at least of AI and machine learning is super important. But any final thoughts you want to wrap up with? Anything that you think Green Screen specifically is doing to help out some of these areas we're talking about, or anything you want to say to wrap up?
Yeah, first off, appreciate this. Appreciate everybody coming in. I know there's quite an audience here, and obviously this will be downloaded and watched later. So appreciate everybody taking the time with it. There's a lot of really good things, and certainly not enough that we could cover during this time. So reach out to our team, reach out to the Tie team. They'll get you in contact with us. If you're already a Tie customer, even better. Again, it is hands down the best TMS integration we have out there, but our team's willing to take the time, go through everything with you, make sure you fully understand our product. It is not Chat GPT. It's not Microsoft's Copilot or anything like that. Actual machine learning. And again, you can download that white paper to get to the core of why is machine learning different than AI, right? We're not just spitting out some movie time answer. This is really in depth. It's unique and catered to your business. Only pricing product out there that is building brokerage or business specific pricing. So you'll see where you're at. You'll see where the rest of the market is at. You will also understand how easy or difficult it'll be to cover at those prices that we're predicting. We have a report card out there for you too. If your pricing product you use today doesn't tell you and show you your accuracy, question that. I'd be very concerned, and I was very concerned when I had other products. But really appreciate it, and just something special for all the existing Tie customers or anybody thinking of making the change to Tie. If you do so in the near future, we're running a special promotion through the end of July. You don't have to be onboarded and implemented. You just need to commit before the end of July. We will waive your implementation fees on our side of the fence. So really simple, really great program for you. Again, don't be cost adverse. Don't be shy from it. Find out what it costs. One of the things I always, and I'm sensitive to it with our company, is I don't hear that we're expensive, which is kind of shocking. I know where everybody else is priced in the market. I think we're an incredible value right now. We made a point to hold last year's pricing through this year as a response to the economy. We're trying to grow with customers. We don't want to be cost restrictive to anybody. So even to that point, if you do get through the entire sales process with our team and you find out that we are just a hair out of budget, let me know. Let our CEO know. Let somebody in our executive team know. Love to have a conversation about what makes sense and try to help you before we get back to being busy in this industry.
Yeah, I love it. And I can attest that our mutual customers that are using green screens, I never hear them complain about the pricing of it. I think that you guys have done a really good job pricing it in a way that makes it so that really you only see the value. And when you use it, for any Thai current customer, anybody who uses it with Thai, it's super simple. It's built right into the TMS for you, so it's very easy. And I'll just say to wrap it up here too, we have this white paper here that's the 8 areas to improve your freight brokerage. That is not, I promise you, that is not a sales pitch for Thai. That is just 8 areas we have identified that if you can improve those within your brokerage, you will end up delivering a better customer service. And I interviewed about 100 different brokers for that article before we wrote it up, and I think it's really, really useful. Now, if you are interested in Thai and you want to find out where we can help you with those 8 areas, that is also something I'd love to talk to you about. And you can book a demo with us, and we can go through them point by point to find if these are problem areas for you. I do believe Thai can help you with them. So thank you to everybody for attending. I hope everybody got a lot out of this. We'll be sending out a recording of this, and we'll follow up probably with some thank you messages as well. So appreciate everybody for joining. And Matt, always good to talk to you, man. Thank you so much for doing this webinar with me.
Likewise, and I'm confident I'll see you on the road very, very soon.
Hopefully not too soon, but yeah, I'll see you soon, man. All right. Thank you, everybody.